for those of you that are force feedback fanatics, this app is absolutely glorious. And it's Marvin's awesome iRacing app, which is basically a piece of software that replaces the force feedback that you get from iRacing, but crucially also allows you to add in additional effects and just change and shape things to dial in the force feedback to however you want. This application should be available for every racing simulator. And the way this application works and the options that this application has should be available for every racing simulator. Now, I'm going to go through the main options that are available with this, how this application works, why it's so good, how it affects driving, how it affects the force feedback. And if you don't use this, or at least try it, especially if you're playing iRacing, believe me, you are really, really missing out. So before we continue on, why not subscribe so you can then unsubscribe? Give the like button a tickle. And of course, as always, I have to thank all our channel members and supporters. We've got Patreon, we've got Twitch memberships, we've got YouTube memberships. Really appreciate you guys allowing us to do this kind of stuff. You know, no one else is making this mental content, so thank you very much. So, first things first, this is, you can think of it a bit as a replacement for FFB. That had a lot of similar options, but Marvin's awesome iRacing app takes things to another level, but also runs a lot better and a lot more reliably than FFB, and doesn't require as much fiddling at all. You can just download this, launch it, turn off the force feedback in the game, select the force feedback in the app, and you're done. It will also automatically remember all the settings you've done for each car and just work immediately. I've not had this app crash at all or any problems since getting it. It also updates through the application. Marvin is a genius and clearly levitates around because he's blessed by the glory of force feedback. I've put a shrine in the Church of Force Feedback for him. So the big things to be aware of and why this app is so significant for force feedback is a fewfold, not even twofold, it's a fewfold. One is that you can specifically just set your wheelbase strength, maximum strength of your wheelbase, whatever your wheelbase is. I'm using a Mozart R21 here, you just selected from this list. And then you can select the minimum strength that you want the force feedback output to be and the maximum strength you want the force feedback output to be. That already lets you control the strength of things to some degree and to dial things in to some degree. For example, the having an output minimum allows you to set a minimum force. That means if you had a wheel that's an older wheel, like a T300, G29, G293, or something older, some of those wheels you might want a minimum amount of force to make them move because they wouldn't move without a minimum amount of force. With a DD wheel, any DD wheel, or anything from a T300 upwards, you shouldn't have that issue, so you could just set it to 0. But you can get your wheel configured, dialed in, and crucially, from that basic component of that, you can then see on this graph what's going on with the force feedback signal from the game and whether or not the signal is clipping from the game. Now, the main thing as well is that you can also just adjust the strength that it's actually output at and just adjust it quickly on the fly with this overall scale setting. So once you've got this, the wheel set up initially, you just start driving. You're like, oh, okay, that's a bit too weak. I want it a bit stronger. You know, just fiddle with it whilst you're driving. Sorted. Dialed in immediately. You can automatically click a button for it to max out the force feedback before it starts clipping. But yeah, immediately, just from a fundamental being able to feel your force feedback or dialing your strength settings with a really, really clear graph that shows what's going on, well, it's happy bloody days. Now, another really nice aspect of this app is that it has this detail scale slider, and what this lets you do is effectively, if you lower this down, you end up with a smoother signal in terms of you're getting more lower frequency, or it's filtering out higher frequency bumps and noise. So if there's too much curbing feel, too much sort of track bumpy texture, too much steering rack, or too much sort of high frequency notchy texture, and you want to focus more on tyre load and car load feel, then you can just move this detail scale down to whatever you like for the specific car to get the feeling that you want from the sim. Can you imagine? Could you imagine if that option was built into LMU or rFactor 2 without you having to use ludicrous amounts of in-game filtering that then remove loads of subtle details? Or imagine this in any sim, really, just being able to slide that and be like, oh yeah, that's a bit too much road texture. Oh, that's enough, that's good. Fantastic. I mean, absolutely amazing. You can, of course, as well, also have it so that force feedback, when you're stopped and parked, you can change the exact amount of strength that comes through the wheel so that when you're stopped, the wheel doesn't oscillate and do weird stuff. It is also possible to shape the output of the force feedback with this output curve setting, so you could make your force feedback sort of a non-linear response in either direction. That can be quite good if you're on a lower end wheel or you've got driving a specific car and you want to make it feel sharper and more immediate. But in most cases, with any sort of wheel, I'd say above like a CSL belt-driven wheel, like the old Fanatec wheels, or anything, anything DD, you probably just want to keep this on 1.0. But the point is, you can fiddle with this and adjust it and dial it into whatever you want. We're not done though, guys. We're not done. This also has some really other spectacular settings and options that, if you're a force feedback fanatic, will absolutely blow your brains off. A really big thing with this app, and a thing that I think, again, this is something that LMU could really benefit from, and some other sims could benefit from, is the fact that you can change the force feedback frequency from the sim. Now, I believe this app is taking iRacing telemetry to then drive the force feedback. So when you turn this up, it's not that it's just interpolation, which is how most force feedback wheels will get a smoother signal. I believe this is actually taking telemetry from the game and then outputting it at a higher frequency. Regardless of how it's doing it, though, even if it is still interpolation, by being able to up the frequency of the simulator, you can really get rid of that built-in kind of graininess to the force feedback, and you can make it feel really smooth and really rubbery. And if you don't want that, you can turn this down to the original iRacing frequency, or all the way up to 500 hertz. So you can just fiddle with this, see what you like, see what works best, see if something introduces some delay or latency, or see if something happens to work better or worse with a given car. It's up to you. You can do whatever you want. Imagine giving the end user the freedom to be able to mess around with things immediately and understand how their wheel works and what they like and what they don't like. Imagine not locking it behind some weirdo interface and text file. I know it's crazy. This is I'm telling you, Marvin's got a statue in the Church of Force Feedback. Now, really powerful. Get ready. This is the God beam coming through the church window. Really powerful is we have this steering effects option, and this is where you get this sort of seat of the pants or oversteer and understeer effects options that you would get with IR FFB, and to be fair, with AccuForce wheel and some of the wheels on the market, you can do this. But a lot of wheels and most sims don't allow you to control this or fiddle with this. And this can be a super powerful setting. Warning though, it is a bit like the dark side of the Force. You can go too far and you can completely ruin everything. You might think you're having a good time, but before you know it, you've spun off the track due to your force feedback being overactive and ridiculous, and a whole planet has gone. Whoops! So you have to be careful with this, but what's really powerful with this is that you can set, for example, the understeer. We'll start with that because it's at the top of the app here. You can have it so that when you start understeering in your simulator, the car or that your wheel will produce a vibration in the force feedback for understeer, depending on the amount of understeer that you're getting. So you can set the strength of that vibration, you can set the shape of how that vibration comes in, and you can set the start and end point of when this vibration will start to come in. And it doesn't just have to be a vibration. It could be that the force feedback gets weaker or the force feedback gets stronger rather than it just vibrating. To know how much slip a given car's doing, you can put this skid pad tab on here and have a look, and you can see, well, this is how much oversteer we've got, and that's how much understeer is going on. Not much understeer. But that allows you to see what you're doing with your inputs and what telemetry is basically coming out to the wheel to drive those effects. So you can look at the amount, the yaw rate here, and then you can dial it in on this tab in accordance with what's going on there. Things are a little bit finicky with that. It is a bit hard to dial in to get it just right, but because you can just fiddle with it whilst you're doing driving and testing, I highly recommend the centrifugal track. You can get things feeling pretty decent. For understeer, personally, I would recommend using a vibration rather than a reduced force, though it depends what you're doing. Track racing, I'd go with a vibration for understeer, a bit like AC1's built-in understeer effect, which ends up feeling a bit like a road car tyre. When you understeer with a road car tyre in real life, the carcass tends to vibrate as the treads, like purchase and unpurchase. Slick tyre in real life doesn't really vibrate like that, or any slick tyre I've been on, and even cut slicks don't, from my memory, don't really vibrate like that. They might do in some conditions, but having the reference there and that vibration-y feel is really good to let you know that you are pushing the fronts of the tyres, or maybe overdriving a bit into the corner without having to just use audio to know. Oval, you might want to use reduced force, and just fiddle around with it, guys. You can just do whatever you want. Don't use my settings. Do whatever you want. Now, the really powerful part here, we're talking full enlightenment. But again, this is really dangerous. This is Thanos snap danger. The oversteer, having the oversteer effect, you can set it up exactly like the understeer effect, but if you set it to increase force feedback and then you set the effect strength, as the back of the car steps out, you will get, let's turn this off, you will get an automatic countersteer tug in your force feedback, thus allowing you to feel very clearly in your force feedback that you are inducing oversteer. And just like that understeer effect, you can dial it in however you want. You can also dial in the curve of the effect, so if it comes in really aggressively or it doesn't come in aggressively, the strength of it, the start point, the end point, and also have it so that the effect has a sort of cut-off so that it removes the oscillation in the centre. If you have this sort of oversteer effect, if you get into a tank slapper, if you've got it on quite strong or just set up in certain ways, you will find the wheel just starts fighting itself. And you don't want that. You always, I would argue, you always want your force feedback to help you drive and make it easier to drive. You shouldn't really ever be having a fight with your steering wheel. Unless maybe you're simulating an Indy car literally, or an 80s Formula car literally or something, but it should generally make things easier. And these aren't the settings I normally use for this car. We've only really set this up with the Indy car, but the way I like to set up this oversteer effect is actually to have it on really, really quite weak, and such that when I'm driving, it's just a little bit of extra force there that comes in when the back's stepping out, or when the back's stepping out too much, or when it's stepping out at the perfect amount for what would be good for lap time on a given track, right? But just set it up so it's quite subtle. It just gives you a little extra feeling in the wheel without it affecting your input and driving. It's sort of like an additional layer of feel that in some ways is a bit analogous to the feeling of in a real car when the car rotates. Often in a real car it rotates quite quick, but and even in a go-kart, if you jam the brake on because the brakes are at the rear, it will spin quickly. But it's quite, I have it set up so that with the way you drive in iRacing, you have this sort of nice subtle counter steer, or if you're braking too hard and the back's coming out, or you just get another layer that conveys that sort of seat of the pants rotation feel that's otherwise completely missing in just about all racing simulators. and it's just strange to me because this actually really does demonstrate the power of how much information you can send through the force feedback, and how that's really great because it makes up for that lack of feel that you get in a simulated car compared to a real car. Obviously, it's worth saying this, you know, at the end of the day, force feedback cannot fix a driving simulator's inherent physics. So if you're driving a car that's particularly wonky, you could feel it quite nicely or get certain information by using these types of seat of the pants effects and what have you. But at the end of the day, you're only going to be able to drive the car as it drives in the sim. And that's one of the reasons why, actually, in some cases, I turn off a lot of these effects, especially in iRacing, and why, actually, in some ways, I stopped using FFB, because it would lure me into a sense that I could actually be driving in slip and holding slip as I would drive in R Factor 2 and the original Assetto Corsa, when in reality, in iRacing, if you do that with many of the cars, you will actually just be slower, and you will overheat, flash heat the tyres, and you'll end up spinning or getting into a stuck physics state, which is just not realistic. But the force feedback would imply to me that I could drive it like AC, and it would lure me into then trying to actually drive the car reactively, which is not particularly a good way to drive in iRacing. So that's why I generally stopped using it. But since the tyre model changes and certain cars in iRacing, I would actually use these seat of the pants things again. And particularly because you can dial in the seat of the pants so much better in Marvin's app, you can make it so that you're still really hyper aware of the limitations of the given simulator that you're driving. But yeah, no, it's just absolutely superb. And this should be, this type of force feedback app interface, this should be the default for like every sim. This is like, it should just clearly show what's going on. The other thing is, you can, like, just basic things like clipping, or when you adjust stuff, you can see how it's manipulating the signal and what's going on. So it just makes it super, super clear. Absolutely amazing. There's a load of other features for this application, like you can have the LFE vibration audio effects, you can send stuff out to pedals. Marvin keeps adding even more to this application. I'm actually worried that he's going to take over the world like a replicator. That's 3 separate science fiction reference there, guys. Hope you appreciate that. But yeah, bloody good. You need to download this and try this and give it a go for yourself and just fiddle with it and enjoy the joys of force feedback, because that, to me, is the point of life. Life is just the force. So thanks for watching this video. Hopefully you found it useful. I'm going to try and remember to stick the settings that we have for this Mozart R21 and other force feedback settings on our Patreon. I'm terrible at updating it. I'm actually awful at what I do. But we'll try our best. But you can also catch us in live streams. As soon as someone asks, we just show them our settings for whatever we happen to be driving. We do like 10-hour live streams all the time, so it's a good way to find out what we're doing. But until the next one, guys, thank you for watching this enlightened, beautiful force feedback video. Happy tea drinking. Take care. And goodbye.